Hey, well, actually, into today's video, we're going to have a look at whether the next 8 to 10 days in today's video takes us up to around the 12th, 13th of February. No real change on the situation yesterday. High pressure is going to be dominating through the first half of February anyway, so it's going to be notably dry, I think, through the first half of the month. And it's not going to be particularly cold, I don't think, next week under that high pressure. It's going to depend whether we get fog, really. You can get two kinds of sort of mid-latitude high pressures this time of year. You can get one that's cloudy and not overly cold, with temperatures tend to hover around normal. You get another one that's clear, and you get a lot of fog with that. And of course, if it's foggy during the day, then it will depress the temperatures a lot. So it's difficult to say quite how the temperatures are going to be next week. We don't tend to get as much fog as we used to. I talked about this a little bit in the broadcast, live broadcast on Saturday. We don't seem to get as much fog as we used to. Obviously, we've cleaned up the air with the Clean Air Act. It did that in the 60s, so obviously we don't get the smogs. But even compared to, say, 10, 15 years ago, we don't get as much fog. I'm not sure why that is, to be honest, whether it's an increase in the sea temperatures around the coast of the UK. I'm not sure quite why it is that we don't get as much fog, or just that the towns and cities are a little bit bigger, I suppose. They're built out, haven't they, compared to 10, 15 years ago. Maybe it's that, but anyway, we don't seem to get as much fog, so probably it'll just be a cloudy high with temperatures coming out around sort of normal next week. But if it is foggy, then it'll be a lot colder. Have a look at all the charts in a moment. Before I get on with that, just say about the ads. There's links to articles on most pages at Gary'sWebVids.com. Have a browse of widgets, and any articles that you're interested in, just click through. Thanks so much for doing that. So let's just have a quick look at 500 millibar heights. As I say, no real change on the situation yesterday. We've got the east end of the Earth here on the left. The GFS is over on the right. 500 millibars, 8,000 feet is an area in the atmosphere where high pressure, low pressure are being moved around by the jet stream, and that essentially is what weather is, the movement of the air by the jet stream. Red is extrapolating to above average heights, that's high pressure. Blue to below average heights, that's low pressure. And what we see here very evidently is that we've got a big area of above average heights indicated by these red colours, sitting right over top of the UK and extending out into the Atlantic as well. The jet stream, quite a strong jet stream, is running generally to the north of the country and then diving southwards into the southeast of Europe. So our cold that currently got at the moment over us and over much of northern and western Europe is going to be pushing down into southeast Europe, bringing a very cold spell to parts of the Balkans, possibly even down as far as Greece as we go through into next week. We'll be hearing a little bit about that, I should imagine, on the news. That's the east end of the Earth. The GFS is very similar. The high pressure again is centred more or less right over the top of the UK. Quite a strong jet stream running out of the Atlantic to the north of the country around that ridge, and then of course the jet dives southwards around that trough once again to the southeast of Europe. Now in theory that's a relatively mild setup because the jet stream is running north, so we're on the mild side of the jet actually, but of course we're under an area of high pressure and it still is winter, so it just depends how much heat radiates out from that high pressure. If we get a lot of cloud under the high pressure, we won't radiate as much heat out. If it's clear, then of course we will radiate heat out, and if it's foggy it could be particularly cold. Notice again both of them cold for the east of the United States, the trough there digging through northern and eastern parts of the states, both agreeing on that. So it's remaining cold for many eastern parts of the states. They're having another very cold winter in the east of America. The GFS ensembles, temperature and precipitation ensembles, show that we're cold on average with the temperatures at the moment. The red line is the 30-year temperature average. We're below average. Obviously, it's a cold spell. It's going to get a little bit colder as we get through to the end of the week. Actually, we do very briefly drop down to minus 10 at 850 HPA just for a few hours on late Thursday into Friday. But after that, the temperatures are picking up. That's as high pressure sort of tumbles down over the country, and it's picking up in terms of the upper air temperature, but unless there's something to stir it up down on the surface, it won't necessarily be all that evident. So yeah, the temperature's lifting up through the course of weekend on into next week, going a little bit above average in terms of the upper air temperatures, but the best we'll have down on the surface will be average temperatures, and it may still be a bit cold on average, particularly if the nights are clear with some hard overnight frost. We go through to the second half of the ensemble. This is the 13th of February just here, for example. So going into the second half of the month, get quite a bit of scatter coming through there. And there are a few ensemble members that are going really quite cold again. They're probably indicating some sort of retrogression of the high pressure back out into the Atlantic and pulling down northerly winds. That is a possibility as we get through towards the middle of the month. Notice how dry the precipitation part of the ensemble chart is as well. Hardly anything coming through really. A few snow showers at times indicated by these little spikes during this cold episode, and then not a great deal. They do come back a little bit more as we get through into the second half of the month, but not really with conviction. That's a very, very dry looking ensemble indeed. Temperature anomaly for the coming week going from the 13th to the 11th of February is colder than average. Most of Central and Western Europe cold on average as well. The warmth is in the east. We're probably going to find over the next few updates of these over the next few days that this cold area in the northwest will become more evident down in the southeast, and it'll probably revert to nearer normal actually in the northwest. So Ireland, Britain, France will probably go a little bit nearer to the normal, and the cold anomalies will shift down to the southeast. It's one of the balancing acts that you tend to get with the weather, that if it's cold in the northwest, it'll be warmer in the southeast. This is of Europe, and if it's warmer in the northwest, it'll be colder in the southeast of Europe. Very often, not always the case, but that's very often what you see. America, very cold, same in the east, so yeah, really cold temperature anomalies there for the east of the United States, but warmth is in the west. That's where all the ridging is. The trough, of course, in the east, bringing that cold air down from Canada. Precipitation anomalies very, very dry through the course of the next week, the 3rd to the 11th. Look at that, hardly any measurable rain for some parts of the country, under 5 millimetres quite widely for most parts of the country. The east actually gets the highest anomaly. It's still much drier than average, but it's in the east that we've got the highest anomaly. That's as we may get little snow showers, particularly coming through on Thursday and into Friday around the eastern side of the country. So here we are with the generic charts. It's the GFS for Sunday the 8th, and the high pressure really, really dominant there. You remember this time last year we was having a real battering from storms and intense areas of low pressure. It just goes to show you how the weather can deviate from one year to another, because this is a very intense area of high pressure that's in there on Sunday the 8th of February, 1,045 millibars. I'm not sure if it's record breaking, but it can't be all that far off the record, a really intense area of high pressure. I think the record is around 150 millibars, or maybe 155 millibars. That's for sitting over the top of the country or in the Atlantic sort of region. It can get higher, of course, further north around Scandinavia. You can go up to 160 millibars sometimes around Scandinavia when the high pressure ridges in. And over Greenland, it can go up to 170 millibars. You remember seeing 170 millibar area of high pressure over Greenland during that severely cold freeze-up of December 2010. Anyway, I digress. For Sunday, we're under the area of high pressure, very intense area of high pressure, so largely going to be dry. If you follow the ice bars back there, the area is actually originating from the central part of the Atlantic, so that's the reason temperatures will be picking up a little bit over the weekend into next week. But of course, with that high pressure centrally located over the country, if the nights are clear, they will still be very cold. We could get fog as well. High pressure hangs around into Monday and into Tuesday, and on into Wednesday as well. So very quiet weather through the course of next week with high pressure dominating. In fact, the whole of next week is indicated to be anticyclonic by the GFS today. Turning up to Friday the 13th, middle part of the month, high pressure is very dominant. The longer term picture will be where this high pressure goes. What happens with it? Will it collapse south and allow the westerlies to return? Will it go north and finish up, or not finish up, but will it go north for a time and sort of get to Greenland, Iceland, Scandinavia, somewhere cold, and allow us another cold shot? That will be the question for the second half of the month. But for next week, the second week of February, high pressure sitting over country, very, very dominant. For the East WF, again, the high pressure is in there across the country. For the ice bars back, the air originates from the central part of the Atlantic, so it will be turning less cold over the weekend. And we keep high pressure going. Now, we do put a cold a cold northerly down through central parts of Europe. We're just on the periphery of that. It looks like the high pressure will stay close enough to us to prevent this cold air coming in. But it's a close run thing, and it will only take a little bit of an adjustment for particularly northern east parts of the country. Get another cold shot late next weekend into the start of next week. But let's say the general idea is for the high pressure to be in there across the country through next week. So no change really between the GFS and the ECM. High pressure very dominant. Although by day 10, Friday the 13th, we may be turning it a little bit more unsettled for Scotland. Possibly bringing some wet and windy weather there. But overall, I think the idea is still for the whole of next week really to be dominated by high pressure. And then finally, as we go through to the GM, high pressure again is very dominant over weekend at 1045 millibars, really intense high pressure, and it just carries on through the course of next week. Now, as we get through to Wednesday the 11th on the GM, there's just a little bit of a hint that the high pressure is trying to pull out into the Atlantic and possibly allow something colder to come back in from the northwest. That's not full-on retrogression of the high pressure, but it's trying a little bit to go out into the central part of the Atlantic and pull the winds into the northwest, but it doesn't really come off, and we just sort of end up with high pressure still more or less in the same position by day 10, which is very dominant, sitting ever so slightly to the west of the country and keeping it generally very quiet. Notice northerly winds again pushing into Scandinavia. If I was to hazard a guess on this, I've got a feeling that this high pressure is eventually going to allow some colder winds to extend in again after mid-month. I reckon this high pressure could well end up back out in the northern Atlantic, possibly going towards Iceland and Greenland, but not sure about that. But I certainly think that northerly shot, quite a big northerly shot through the third week of February isn't out of the question on this sort of thing. I've got on this sort of setup. I think that's probably a little bit more likely than the high pressure collapsing and we finish back up in a mild westerly flow. But let's wait and see on that. It's very speculative. That's sort of what I went for with the February month head forecast, so we're probably going to have a cold shot second half of the month. But no real sign of it anyway on this morning's model. So the overall idea today, very similar to what we had yesterday. The high pressure's dominating over weekend into next week. Going to keep it very dry, very quiet, not a lot going on. Temperatures will recover a little bit, going back up towards average probably. Although if it's clear under that high pressure, I have to emphasise this, if it's clear, we'll get hard overnight frost and we will possibly get quite a lot of fog as well, and that will have the effect of limiting a lot of those daytime temperatures. So very quiet for the time being. That's all for now, and thanks for watching.